Let's get more on the developments at the Supreme Court. TVC News Judiciary Correspondent Celestina Iria has been monitoring this story, and she joins me on the news. Tina, what more can you tell us at this time?
Well, Precious, the court has reserved judgment in the petition, the appeal, filed by the Labour Party and the PDP, and the court dismissed that of the APM after they had withdrawn their appeal. But we know that everything that was brought before the Supreme Court will be the judgment delivered by the Court of Appeal, which sat at the Presidential Election Petitions Court. But the PDP filed an interlocutory application, which they are seeking to bring in new evidence. I know that evidence is a copy of the president's certificate from Chicago State University. And this was gotten through a discovery which was done at the U.S. court, where the court ordered the school to present the certificates to them. And in the course of that proceedings, the position was made by the registrar of the CSU as to the certificates, because the PDP alleged that there were some discrepancies in the certificate that the president submitted to INEC, and the certificate that the school issued in 1979 and that which the president submitted to INEC were not same. These were the allegations. But if we recall the proceedings and the deposition made by Caleb Wexball, which is the registrar of the CSU, he said that the certificate of 1979 and 2002 or 2020 will be different because the school is changing, formats are changing. And we recall that the president has said that the one that was issued to him by the school in 1979, he actually misplaced it when he went on ESA in 1990. So the school reissued the certificate to him, different fonts, different seal. But the PDP are saying that that certificate is not a certificate from the school. But one thing is for a fact, which we know, the school has not come out to disclaim or say that certificate was false. So these were the issues, that certificate now that Atiku and the PDP had gotten. This is what they are seeking to tender before the Supreme Court. Now, when moving the application, they had a little time for deliberation. Counsel to the PDP was praying the court to admit the certificate in evidence. But the justices of the Supreme Court asked him a very important question. How would they tie this evidence? Because this is, as Justice Inyangokoro, who is the lead member of the panel, he said that this is a criminal offense. If we admit this in evidence, how do we hear from the person who you are accusing of presenting false results to INEC? Are we going to now call witnesses? Will pleadings now be made? This is the Supreme Court. Supreme Court do not entertain such. And besides, the deposition that was made by Wexball, who is the registrar of the CSU, which is the Chicago State University, was done in the office of Atiku's lawyer in the U.S. It wasn't done before a court. Justice Emmanuel Agim raised a very important issue. He said that the PDP ought to have gone back to the courts that gave the order that the results be given to them to do the deposition. And it was the stenographer of a court that handled the deposition. So the court started asking the question, did the stenographer have the right to conduct proceedings? Counsel to the president, Wole Olanipekun, noted that a deposition is dormant until when the deponent appears before a court to adopt it. So how does the PDP intend to tie this evidence before the court? So a lot of issues were raised, and they were able to move the application and the appeal, and the court said that judgments will be delivered together.
Tina, I want to come in here because I want you to, for those who are really confused, and I know you have done really well in explaining all of this, especially with the certificates. For those who are wondering what this all means, what does it mean? Does it mean that that issue has been laid to rest? Tell us more about that.
Okay, yes. The issue has not been laid to rest because the court is yet to decide on it. The Supreme Court said that the day it will deliver judgment in the main appeal, that is the same day it will rule on the PDP's application, which is seeking to bring in new evidence, of which they will look at the evidence. But the issue they are raising, or the question they pose to the counsel to the PDP, how do they bring in the evidence? Because the PDP was saying that the 180 days prescribed by Section 243 and Section 285 of the Electoral Act on the Constitution do not apply to them. Now, the Supreme Court is saying they want 80 days as elapsed. The Supreme Court has just 60 days to deliver judgment from the day judgment was delivered by the Court of Appeal. Now, another position held by the PDP is the fact that the Court of Appeal is a court and not a tribunal. So they are trying to place backing on how the Supreme Court would admit this evidence. So the Supreme Court now is saying, how do they admit it? Is it going to be as evidence or issues for determination? Or so they were kind of confused, asking the council to give them clarity. But of which they said they will look at it and also deliver judgment, at which they've reserved judgment and to date to be communicated to parties. But they moved over to the petition filed by the Allied People's Movement, which is the APM. The Supreme Court said that they have already decided on that particular issue, which is in the case of the PDP versus Kashim Shettima, and also the president and the APC were respondents in that very appeal. The court said it cannot sit as an appeal against its own judgment. The issue of double nomination on the placeholder was already decided in that very case, that the appellants, which is the APM, struggled their way at the Court of Appeal. Now they are back at the Supreme Court. And the court did not have time for frivolities. So they gave hints to the lawyer, which is the counsel to the APM, to withdraw the application. After much back and forth, yes, he got a hint from the court and he withdrew the application. Justice Emmanuel Agim made an important point that this appeal that the APM brought before them, there is no order as to what the court should do if the appeal was to succeed. What is the consequential order that the court needs to make? Okay, fine, you are alleging that the vice president had a case of double nomination or placeholder. Okay, if the court was to find out that, yes, that is the case, what should the court do? Nullify the election or do what? Or bring in your candidates as the winner? There was no consequential order. As the court will always say, you cannot place something or nothing and expect it to stand. So that was the reason the court dismissed the APM appeal after they had withdrawn it. And the court moved over to that of the Labour Party and also every party, the argument for and against, and the court adjourned for judgment, which has been reserved and data communicated to parties. But we could recall that now the justices of the Supreme Court are just 10 in numbers. Yes, because Justice Datijo is retiring on Friday. They were actually 11. We've known that the court also lost Justice Santon Suweze and Justice Amina Aogim has retired. So there are just 10 of them, and 7 are the ones that is sitting on this very case. So they have a lot of work on their hands and will need to manpower, but they are saying that they will do their best and ensure that every party gets justice and the cases will be well decided.
Interesting development there. We'll see how it plays out. Thank you so much for that update. Our correspondent there live for us in Abuja, Celestina Iria.